60% mental and 40% physical.
Math was never our strong suit, but breaking down Ohio State football is. Sit back and join us for Buckeye Grove Instant Access, part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You can do it!
Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. Post-game thoughts, immediate analysis, and much, much more to put the big game into perspective. Without any further delay of game, here's your host, Kevin Noon.
Kevin, goddammit.
Hey, welcome into the BIA podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I'm, of course, joined with Keaton Maisano and Braden Moles here after the conclusion of Ohio State's 34-10 win. We are putting in the midnight overtime as we are here at Ohio Stadium recording it. Let's just jump right into it. Michigan State did some things well, but just was not able to really put enough together. You know, your initial thoughts on the game, Keaton?
You really got to see Michigan State's toughness in that first quarter, and Ohio State really had to step up and match that, and I think they really did. I mean, in the second quarter, they bounced back, had 296 yards of total offense. They were able to run the ball. They were able to pass the ball. And the big plays really started to come for them, and that's what really opened up this offense, and I think Ohio State responded to the challenge very well.
I think, you can officially say now, Ohio State, they got on the bus, they sharpened their number 2 pencil, and they finally took a test this season. Michigan State is a good team. They were a top 25 team, and there were some struggles early on, but Ohio State was eventually able to kind of assert some dominance over Michigan State. The 24-point second quarter, shutting them down offensively, with the exception of the 10 points in the second quarter by Michigan State. Just another dominant performance by Ohio State.
Yeah, that first quarter, though, left a lot to be desired. I think there were a lot of uh-ohs going through the crowd as they were struggling. But, to their credit, they were able to force a couple fumbles, keep Michigan State at bay. Michigan State was not able to capitalize on Ohio State's slow start.
Yeah, and I think that's what really is the difference from last season to this season is a slow start last season would really hurt Ohio State because they didn't have the defense to just hold down the fort until the offense got things going. So defense played well. They were able to weather the storm and just hold Michigan State at bay for the offense to get going. And even when Michigan State had the 2 drives where they scored 10 points, the defense was able to respond, bend, not break, and then not give up any points for the last 38 minutes of the game.
I think this was a big game for Ryan Day's play calling. 'Cause, as Justin Fields and Day both said in their post-game press conferences, there wasn't any drastic shift between the first and second quarter in terms of what they were doing with scheme, play calling. It was just simply executing, which, they were having issues in the first quarter with the offensive line being beaten up a little bit by Michigan State's defensive line. But as the game progressed, they stuck with what they wanted to do, and it eventually worked.
Justin Fields threw his first interception of the season in this game. He was 17 of 25 for 206 and 2 touchdowns, and, of course, kept his passing for a touchdown, rushing for a touchdown streak alive. So through all 6 games, only guy in college football to do that. Preliminary grade out what your thoughts were on Justin's evening.
If you're comparing it to, the other games, it's, I think, one of his worst games, if not the worst, as far as just looking clean. He looked kind of rusty, but just the quarterbacks that we've had in the past, or Ohio State's had in the past, is they've just, with JT Barrett, you have to win those games where maybe it's not your best stuff. You have to grind out the game. I think Justin Fields really did that today. Even that touchdown run, I think, kind of embodied that, just that tough run to get that yard for a touchdown. I think he was able to just do enough, be able to, make some plays. He flashed his talent, but it wasn't his best game at all. But going into the off week, he'll be able to improve on some stuff, and I think he'll come back even stronger.
I think Justin Fields had an okay game this week. Decent, 17 of 25. The interception, obviously, only around 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. But it's fine that he was okay this week. They, as Keaton alluded to, the difference from last year, they have a defense this year that can take the quarterback not having, needing to throw for 400 yards to win a game. If Fields has a game with only 206 passing yards, that's a game that this 2019 Ohio State team can win.
As we were kind of talking when we were walking back up to the press box, too, now there's not going to be the questions around Justin Fields of when's he going to throw that first pick. That's kind of over and done with. Looking at the running game, they ran for 323 yards, just 3 guys carrying the ball, J.K., Master Teague, and Justin Fields, of course. J.K. Dobbins, 24 carries for $172, 67-yard home run hit, 7.2 yards per carry average. Pretty good day by J.K. Dobbins, as he's already getting close to closing in on 1,000 yards this season.
Yeah, J.K. really ran hard, especially second quarter onward. Ohio State had 0 rushing yards after the first quarter. They ended up with 323, so that's very impressive. But yeah, just overall, J.K. Dobbins really showed his toughness throughout this season, and then he showed the ability to hit the home run ball. broke a 67-yard rushing touchdown tonight. I mean, the offensive line really picked up their play, too. They matched the intensity that Michigan State came out with, and they were able to create enough holes for J.K. Dobbins to get through. And even Justin Fields, just that new element that Dwayne Haskins couldn't bring to the offense last season. But just they had enough wrinkles in there to get it going eventually, and they were able to weather that first quarter kind of drought.
Obviously, both J.K. Dobbins and Master Teague had good games. I think from Dobbins specifically, this 176 yards on 24 carries, 7.2 yards per carry. 172 yards. This is just something I think we can expect on a weekly basis from him. Maybe not that many yards, but a consistent performance, averaging over 5 or 6 yards per carry. We've seen consistency from him over the last few games. It's good to see. And then also in the rushing game, I think Justin Fields showed some really nice pocket awareness this week with his ability to escape and take off. There were a few design runs that he took off on, but his ability to escape from the pocket and add to the rushing game, another great step for him in that department this week.
Yeah, exactly. I think that Ohio State fans are just very familiar with seeing a robust rushing game, and they had it here. And I think it's kind of a bit of a safe space for them. They like going to that when games are tough. And last season we certainly saw games where they went to the well there. And again, we're talking about a 13-1 team last season, but maybe the run game wasn't there in the capacity that they needed. And, that wasn't necessarily what cost them the Purdue game by any stretch of the imagination. But then again, if they would have been able to run the ball a little bit better, maybe we wouldn't have seen the situation that they got themselves into. We're going to talk about defense and some missed opportunities here on the other side of the break after we hear from our friends at Hague Water Conditioning. Hague Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HagueH2O.com. Welcome back. Again, we are sitting here at Ohio Stadium after a 34-10 Ohio State win over Michigan State. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. Let's talk a little bit about Ohio State's defense and Michigan State's offense. I'm going to get out ahead of this and say that Brian Lewerke looked like a very different quarterback than what we'd seen in previous years. While he wasn't exactly, super proficient in terms of putting points up on the board, 20 of 38, 218, touchdown, did throw an interception. He was dropped 4 times. You look at the rushing numbers for Michigan State, 27 carries for 67 yards. That comes in about 2.5 yards per carry. Not exactly what's going to get it done. Ohio State did a pretty good job with those 4 sacks. They were able to really get in there and affect a lot of things with 9 tackles for loss. Just where do you think the defense looked, what it looked like today?
Well, I think overall the defense looked very stout. I mean, Lewerke, like you alluded to, he looked like a different quarterback. He looked more confident. He was able to use his legs a lot to create a couple first downs. But Ohio State, what they did is they really came out and they stopped the run, which really kind of shut down Michigan State's offense. I mean, when you're only able to be a one-dimensional team, it's really tough to be able to move the ball down the field and score points. And then that's what Ohio State made Michigan State do. They couldn't run the ball at all. And the secondary played well again. I mean, Jordan Fuller had an interception. Damon Arnett had a couple good plays. And the linebackers played well again, stayed in their gaps, and just avoided the big home run hitters that cost them last season. And the defense just continuing to build on their performances.
I think the rushing game is where they made their money this week, limiting, like Kevin had said, Michigan State as a team to only 2.5 yards per carry. I'm not exactly as high on the secondary this week as I think Keaton may be. I mean, I think there were still some chunk plays they gave up that, more than you'd be comfortable with, especially more than you've seen in some of the other games this season. But, overall, they had a nice game, limiting Lewerke to only 218 yards after he's had a pretty good season. And, obviously, the defensive line getting home with 4 sacks is great to see. So, overall, a good performance from the defense today.
One thing I think that people would be a little concerned with maybe was Ohio State was a little bit more sloppy in terms of penalties. They had a couple of key penalties. They had a defensive touchdown wiped off the board because of a illegal crackback block, essentially. Not that anybody that I've spoken to really was able to see something that would warrant the flag, but it is a point of emphasis. So, I mean, I guess we can understand it, but we also saw Ohio State shoot itself in the foot a couple times with just some procedural things, some holding calls, probably not one of their cleanest games. And, I think it's something, though, that the coaches, while they never want to necessarily have something like that, it's just one more thing that they can kind of rally around here going into the open week and say, we got to clean this up, we got to clean that up, we got to clean the other up.
Well, yeah, this is kind of the perfect time to have it. I mean, you don't want the penalty problems to hit you in a playoff game or in a Big Ten championship game. You'd rather have it happen like at home against Michigan State. It won't cost you. I mean, 10 for 85 is not good. They had a couple of holding calls that kind of hurt the offense, especially in the first quarter. But that's not been really the problem for Ohio State this year. So they've really kind of avoided it up to this point. So hopefully that's more of a outlier than a trend that's about to start for Ohio State. But yeah, I think the opportunities were there for Ohio State early. They just kind of didn't capitalize in the first quarter, and then they were able to fix some stuff going forward in that game.
I kind of agree with Keaton. I would look at this game as kind of the exception in terms of the penalties, not the rule. Because, I mean, you look back at some of the previous Ohio State-Michigan State matchups, those have been some messy battles. I mean, I don't have the stats put up in front of me, but if you look at those games, I imagine you're going to find a lot of penalty yards in some of those matchups between, previously Urban Meyer and Mark D'Antonio. So I don't think that's going to be something that's going to pop up, going forward. Something obviously they need to work on over the off week. And then I think in terms of missed opportunities, I think, Fields had some open throws that he couldn't quite complete. I mean, there were a few times he was being rushed out of the pocket, so wasn't able to quite look downfield as much as he'd like to. But, yeah, just small things I think that they'll be able to work on going into the off week as they prepare for Northwestern.
We're not going to get into breaking down position by position at this point. We're going to rejoin you here on Monday with the podcast as well that will kind of wrap up the first half of the season. But this being kind of that first test, Braden really hit the nail on the head when he talked about getting out the number 2 pencil and everything with that. But, how valuable is it that Ohio State got tested? Was it better for them that they had this kind of test now instead of having another walkover and then going into the open week and then they draw Northwestern the following week, who just really has not proven to be all that much this season? They're not the Big Ten West champion like they were last season. I mean, how important is it?
I think tests are always important because whenever you're just rolling over opponents, I think you can get that complacency. I mean, Ohio State's been saying it, hey, we're not going to be complacent, we're not going to be complacent. But if you never get tested, you really don't know how you're going to react in moments of adversity. And that first quarter really showed it for Ohio State. I mean, the offensive line didn't play well, so you're forced to look yourselves in a mirror when you get a test. And Ohio State was able to do that, and they were able to respond positively, so that's something they can build upon. And when you get a test, you're able to work on stuff that you didn't know were a problem before. When you play Miami, they might not be able to expose deficiencies. So Michigan State was probably able to expose a couple of Ohio State's weaknesses, and they'll definitely work on that in the next 2 weeks.
I agree with Keaton. I mean, Michigan State was able to show off some of those weaknesses that Ohio State can look at in the off week. And then I think, you would, if you're Ryan Day, you would obviously love for your team to win 50-0 every week. That would speak to execution on offense and defense and just overall the team buying into everything and just winning games confidently. But that also leads to a situation where, going into Northwestern next in a couple weeks, not really going to be much of a challenge, I don't believe. Going into Wisconsin and getting punched in the mouth, I think you'd rather get punched in the mouth against Michigan State, be able to respond and pull out the win, and then be prepared for those situations against a team like Wisconsin.
Exactly, and not everybody was able to get through this weekend unscathed. When you look at the Big Ten calendar, Maryland was a 48-7 winner over Rutgers, and maybe Chris Ash is sitting at home right now and just was like, I told you it's pretty tough. Penn State 35-7 over a depleted Purdue team. Wisconsin, who we were talking about, 48-0 over Kent State. Minnesota was a 40-17 winner over Illinois. Nebraska kicked a field goal as time expired against Northwestern for a scintillating 13-10 win. And then, of course, the big matchup in the Big Ten, the other ranked versus ranked game, Michigan 10-3 winner over Iowa in a game that really was not all that appealing to watch. And I know that nobody really had a chance to watch a lot of games there, but it really appears that the Big Ten race is starting to kind of shape up. It looks like in the East, it's going to be Ohio State with, Penn State there. And then when you look in the West, I mean, Wisconsin really seems to be the class of that side. I think a lot of people were really excited about Iowa. They were only able to put up 3 points against Michigan, though.
Yeah, and I think it just kind of shows the Big Ten's kind of culture and the mindset of a lot of the teams in the conference is really to build your team around the defense. I mean, a lot of low-scoring games this week. And there's very few offenses that are dynamic to beat the good defenses in the Big Ten. I mean, you see Wisconsin able to do it. You see Ohio State and Penn State be able to put up points, but teams like Iowa and Michigan, they have trouble overcoming the strong defenses that they're facing across the field. And I think definitely Penn State is going to be the biggest test for Ohio State in the division, and then Wisconsin coming into the shoe is going to be a good litmus test to see how those teams are going to stack up as far as like national championship hopes.
Kirk Ferentz and Jim Harbaugh should have to apologize for putting that on the field today. That was just an unfortunate game to watch. You come out of it feeling worse about both teams, even with Michigan coming away with the win. I mean, the offense, Josh Gaddis, up in the box or on the field, hasn't really seemed to make a difference. The offense still can't really seem to do much. I mean, if Iowa had been able to put together a single offensive drive in 4 quarters, then it might have been talking about a different result there. But then beyond that, I mean, Wisconsin looking as dominant as ever against Kent State. And then Maryland, the eternal pendulum of the Big Ten, going between the, I believe, 59-0 loss to Penn State and then coming back with a 48-7 win over Rutgers. So they don't really know what to make of them. So they could be don't believe they're going to be one of the better teams Ohio State faces the rest of the season. But certainly when they come to Ohio Stadium, that is not going to be a game that Ryan Day is going to want to look past.
Yeah, we may not have learned anything about Maryland, but we just furthered our belief about Rutgers, and that's going to probably be a pretty bad bludgeoning in Piscataway here in November. But we'll have some time to talk about that on our next show coming up here this next week as we wrap up the first half of the season. Ohio State 6-0, bowl eligible. Not that I think that really came into question for anybody there, but just figured we'd throw that in. But we're going to wrap this up. We're over 15 minutes on the show. I want to thank Braden Keaton for being a part of it, and thanks for listening. Be sure to catch all of our BIA podcasts here at BuckeyeGrove.com.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game. Exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcasts Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.